I think it's so important to find people who are a good listener and who want to champion who you are. Coming out, there's no rules, there's no set timeline. People should come out when they feel safe. I mean, I remember someone saying to me, oh, because you're gay, does that mean you want to become a woman? I was like, that's not at all like how this works.
Amazing. Well, welcome back to another episode of the SafeTea. I have a really, really special guest on today, Anthony Allen Ramos or Ramos, whatever your flavor is today while you're watching. And it's really incredible to have him on. You know, you've heard from different actors, comedians, and he really is a cultural change maker. His incredible leadership role at GLAAD. He is an advocate, longtime advocate for the LGBTQIA2S and everything else community. So it's really special to have him on because we've talked a lot about identity and finding yourself and then how you're paying it forward for your community. And he literally is the embodiment of what SafeTea stands for. As a reminder to all our viewers and listeners, SAFE stands for seen, accepted, free, and empowered. And when you've achieved that foundation for yourself, the tea part, you know, how do you pour and sip the tea? You transform, elevate, and affirm. And that's how we pay it forward. And he is doing that every day. So welcome.
What a nice intro. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being on. You know, we see you on air a lot. We see you as the face of GLAAD and a beautiful ambassador for our community. So it's nice to actually sit down with you to dive into you and how you got there. So really excited to chat. But before we get into it, because we are the SafeTea, TEA, we like to ask everyone if tea is a big part of their life and how do they take it?
Tea is a big part of my life. I like green tea, a little honey, definitely no milk, because I remember early on someone told me, which is probably not even actually true, that if you put milk in your tea, then the antioxidants go away. So I never put milk in my tea. But
I didn't know
green
that.
Tea, unsweetened, maybe a little honey, you know, depending on
I love
my
that.
vibe.
Is that what you're having now? Let's do a little tea toast.
Yeah, this is what I'm having.
Cheers.
Thank you for having me. Don't spill it yet.
Yeah, don't spill the tea yet. We're going to get into the spilling later.
That's lovely.
I'm having mint. That's usually
I love mint too. That's
mint
like nighttime
and chamomile.
for me.
Yeah.
You know, little relaxing vibe.
Yes, which is hard for us busy bees.
That's right.
Before we get into sort of like your origin story and all, like tell us a little bit about what the Vice President of Communications and Talent and what that role means at GLAAD. What do you do?
Yeah, so GLAAD, for anyone that isn't familiar, we're the world's largest LGBTQ advocacy organization. So what that means is we're working with and through media, film, television, video games, podcasts, music, journalism, to make sure that there are stories and that of our community, of the LGBTQ community, and that also that they are well done, that we're included, and it's that all parts of the community are included.
Yeah.
GLAAD started in 1985, originally as a response to...
The year I was born.
Hey!
They knew it.
They knew it. But in 1985, in New York, that's when these inaccurate headlines were coming out about the AIDS and HIV crisis. And so really GLAAD started to correct those narratives and to kind of show people that, you know, we are not who you think we are. You know, it was remember it was, you know, a gay disease. That was the narrative. So it really GLAAD began to start to correct the narrative. And now flash forward to 40 years later, we're very much about working with the media to make sure that, you know, we're included and stuff. And so I lead all of the work that we do with talent and celebrities in Hollywood in general. And then my counterpart does a lot of the news and rapid response stuff.
Yeah, and you're almost, you know, we see you on a lot of red carpets, hosting a lot of events. You're like an ambassador for our community. Yeah,
and I think, you know, previously, and we can talk about this more, I was, you know, at NBC at Access Hollywood for a long time. And so taking a lot what I learned into that to GLAAD, I had thought that, you know, there was such an opportunity to build our own content and ask our own questions, because I think, you know, the key and the important thing with media is that it shapes narratives of what people think. Yeah. And so, you know, if we have an opportunity to talk to people, get great content that, you know, can potentially change hearts and minds when it comes to LGBTQ acceptance, I mean, why not do it? So that was important for when I started that we do that.
Well, speaking about identity, you know, which is a lot of what we talk about and sort of the seen, accepted, free, empowered part and achieving your safety, we both are so multi-layered. I mean, you're a half Filipino, and half white.
Yes.
And queer.
Yes.
And I'm, you know, South Asian, Pakistani, Muslim, gay. So I think both of us bring really multi-layered identities. Tell me about sort of growing up and your life growing up, and where did you grow up?
I'm an LA native.
Oh, LA! Wow.
I know it's unusual.
So, yeah, it is. But did you how was that? You know, when did you kind of realize you were gay or your identity, and how was your community support at that time? And
Yeah. Well, like the beginning part of it is I think that I grew up very much identifying with the white side of my culture. So I didn't have a lot of my Filipino family involved. And so as I got older, I really wanted to find out who that other side of my, existence was. And I've done that now that I'm older. But I think that early on, I just kind of grew up in Los Angeles, not really knowing that other side of who I was. And then in terms of sexuality and acceptance, I think I probably started to realize something in middle school, but I didn't actually at all even like really process it and realize and accept it until I was in college. So I came out when I was 22,
Okay.
end of college, and I think that by 22 I was already working in the entertainment industry, and I think that people just assumed that I was gay, but they pretty much gave me my space to kind of just figure out who I was.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah.
And so you embrace that identity and that part of you officially sort of after college. You said 22, and I know you mentioned you didn't identify so much with the Filipino side. When did you embrace that identity?
Not honestly until later. I would say in my 30s is when I really started to just be like, who is this person? This other part of who I am. And there's so many queer Filipino people, especially in the entertainment industry. And, I think that exploring one of the ways that I would think back on, during the pandemic, I learned how to make adobo on Instagram with Gina Rosero, who's an amazing queer Filipina person who is a model, a filmmaker, and also just a great chef as well. And so, I loved this kind of idea of learning that cultural part of who I was through food, and kind of just learning those things. Like, for example, like vinegar is in adobo because it preserved the meat back in the day.
Okay.
Like those, little bits of history about where, the people, came up with these authentic, pieces of food, which is really interesting.
Food is the great connector.
Yeah.
100%. I think it's a peacemaker. It's so interesting you said that you didn't embrace the Filipino side of you till 30s, because similarly for me, being Pakistani and Muslim, I felt that community rejected me for my identity of being gay, which also I came to terms with around the same time as you. I mean, I knew I was, but I didn't start telling friends and cousins and things till the 20s. And so I wanted to be for me, it was not about not recognizing it. Maybe yours was a little different. You didn't push it away, but I wanted to push it away.
Yeah.
I wanted nothing to do with being Muslim and Pakistani because I thought that identity hated me. And I think it was only in my 30s when I started reconnecting but it was because of community. I met allies that were really supportive and didn't care that I was gay. I met community members like Fawzia Mirza, who I know, who is a gay filmmaker. And so I felt like I met my sister when I met her. And so then I realized, I love that part of me, and I started reclaiming it. And I think it's really important for LGBTQ people to realize they can be multiple identities. I think we forget. And because we've had parts of our lives that have rejected us, we feel like, we can only be in this one box of being only gay and I can't be anything else, or only a lesbian, trans, whatever it might be. But I think you can be all of your identities. It's really important. And I love celebrating my culture now.
Yeah, I definitely didn't push my Filipino culture away.
For you it was a little
but
different.
I definitely pushed being gay. That was something that I was not.
Yeah.
I was very scared of it. I was so scared of disappointing people. I don't know why I equated that as with being a disappointment, but that's what previous society has said that, so, that was a big part of it. I think, with the Filipino side, I just was because, my dad had passed away, so I didn't have a lot of his family connections. And so, growing up with my mom, who was white, no fault of hers. I just didn't have the community. But thankfully, I found it when I got older.
Which is great. And how was it with sort of your family and community when you did come out? Were they really supportive?
Also, I came out at the Troubadour.
Wow. Oh my God.
Right.
Fabulous.
Famous LA landmark. I was at a concert and I just felt it in this moment. I think thankfully my family was super accepting. I think, in all honesty, it took a second to process.
Yeah.
It wasn't they were throwing a party instantly as I told them, but they were, great relationship with them today. And I think, there was so much misinformation.
What we need GLAAD for. Yeah.
I mean, I remember someone saying to me, oh, because you're gay, does that mean you want to become a woman? I was like, that's not at all how this works.
Correct.
You know what I mean?
And they immediately go, and it may have changed a bit now, but for I think immigrant parents, especially South Asian culture, they immediately go to like AIDS and fear. And it's sort of like, so I think it all comes from fear, misinformation, misunderstanding, which is why the work you do is so important. And seeing entertainment films like Nice Indian Boy and different, so many other LGBTQ films and narratives are important for different generations to understand that this is just normal life.
Yeah,
and it's not something to be scared about.
Totally, we need to see queer people. In media thriving, living amazing lives, being successful, all of those things.
Just existing.
That's why it's so important, because it shapes the narrative.
You came out and what was your job right out of college? Like, did you go right into NBC and entertainment?
So, yeah, it's funny. I, like I mentioned, being an LA native, I worked in radio for a hot minute, just down the street from here. And I then quickly was still in college and was lucky enough to get hired at NBC at Access Hollywood, and they let me finish college while I was working there, which I don't think is even allowed at this point in 2025 because you have to have, X amount of credits and be, all this thing. But luckily, so I was so fortunate to get years head start, while I was still finishing school. So yeah, I kind of worked my way from the bottom. I mean, the first job I had was like delivering coffee in newspapers at 5 a.m. to the producers to. By the time that I left, I was producing and I was contributing on both shows every day.
That's
so,
incredible.
Through that, I did a lot of work booking talent, music, fashion, and events specifically. And so that's kind of how I made my connections in the biz that I ended up taking over to GLAAD. But I learned a lot, being a producer was kind of the ultimate plan when I started and when I was delivering coffee and newspapers, and to have it happen was great,
So you were at NBC for 14 years.
Yes.
And then right after you went to GLAAD. And
yeah, I wasn't looking to leave NBC. It was like 2016. They, I had, actually it was 2017. They had reached out to me. I had worked with GLAAD in like the capacity, of getting coverage on Access Hollywood and obviously because flash forward to this point, I'm out, it was important to me, the work that GLAAD was doing. And so I wanted to have a relationship with them. And so they had reached out to me in 2017 and they said, we really would love someone to kind of lead our work with talent and celebrity. And in Hollywood, is this something that you would be interested in? And I was like, you know what, maybe it is. But again, was happy in my job. I think, the interesting piece of timing of everything was shortly before this, I'd done some reading, just personal development work on how I can be like the best version of myself. And so I think because of that, I was, open to this new opportunity. I mean, it was still scary to leave a job that I liked and had been at for 14 years. Yeah.
While you were inside a major media network, right? And then now the work you're doing is making sure we're represented in those networks and in those stories. What were sort of some of your learnings from not just NBC, but at that time, I feel like there still is a lot of work to be done, but at that point, there's probably way more when you started.
Yeah, it's funny. Thinking back on when I left, I think about these entertainment shows, and so much of the people that consume them are women or LGBTQ people. And I look back on that, and there really wasn't any of those people at the top of the show making those decisions. I mean, and that's not a dig at any of those people that were there because I learned so much from them and was so grateful for the opportunity. But, I was like, it's surprising. You would think that there would be, more than just, straight men running the show. And they did it for a long time really well. And I think it's very different now. But I think it was interesting. I had a really good relationship with everyone, and no one at all made me feel less than because I was gay at all. I think even the fact that I was a man, I think at times even there were times with women that I think they didn't feel as heard. But even though I was gay and still a guy, I never felt that way, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. And the viewpoints, did you see that evolve over the 14 years? With more diverse viewpoints kind of leading?
1,000%. Just the people that were in front of the camera, the people that, behind the camera. I mean, Sean Robinson, who was on there as a host for a really long time, was so much of a inspiration to me when I was, thinking of what I wanted to do. In the late 90s, she was, a black woman who was doing entertainment, journalism, reporting, and was so strong. And
Yeah.
so, to get to work with her was a dream. And, she and I
Yeah.
are still in touch. And, she's doing lots of other things now. But it was, I think she was such a trailblazer in that regard.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like, especially for the gays, it's always these powerful women and women of color, especially, that I think end up becoming our like mentors. And,
Yeah, and like Scott
and
Evans is on there
heroes.
right
Yeah.
now. Like, he's amazing. He does it all, and like he's such a, and he's on, on TV every night as just this true version of himself, and it's great.
Yeah, and I think we saw also in that time that you were in media, and then even to now, we've seen, I feel like, so many different news anchors and hosts also come out, and whether it was Anderson Cooper or was it Don
Lemon, yeah,
yeah, I think, and so that it's been really nice to see, because we didn't know that when their career started, and then now they're still accepted and loved. And I still think my dad loves Anderson Cooper and his reporting, and he's a South Asian man that grew up in a traditional world. Obviously, he's very comfortable with me now, but it took some time. And I remember when he found out Anderson Cooper was gay, and he was like, oh, I really like him, he's gay. That to me wasn't, yes, it can be offensive, right? Because he's like, oh, how can a gay person be good in news? But I don't think that's the way he was saying it. I think for him, that was a learning where he was like, wow, I respect this man and I love his reporting, and he happens to be gay. And so I think to me, that was a beautiful moment, because it was sort of the realization that, yeah, gay people are humans and they're cool and they're smart and you can love them and accept them. And so I think for a lot of people, people like Anderson Cooper, Don Lemon coming out, that means a lot, not just for the gay community, but for straight community too.
It does, because I think also what it comes down to is that so many people have preconceived notions of what they think a gay person is, or what they think a lesbian is, or a trans person, and so there's so many different issues there. And so the more that we see our community represented in all different aspects, like to your point with your dad seeing Anderson, that's great.
Yeah, I think it's incredible. So I feel like you've achieved this. By the time you go to GLAAD, you've kind of like locked in on this safe part of your identity, the seen, accepted, free, empowered. I feel like you're in a really strong position. So this transition to GLAAD, where it was a risk and a leap in the sense, leaving a major network you were at for 14 years. But I feel like you're now already entering this T portion of the transform, elevate, and affirm, because that's what you're doing at GLAAD. So tell me about like when you first started, and how did you shape this narrative of entertainment? And because I feel like it's so strong now, we see a lot of representation. The events you do are everywhere. You get great talent. You have great interviews. Like, how did that all sort of happen?
Yeah.
How did you build that?
Well, I think when I started there, on social, they very much were like sharing other people's content that was great or whatever. And I was like, we should be in there, like, creating our own stuff and asking our own questions. So that was the first step. I was like, I think that there's an opportunity here, and I will, as much as I think that it's important that GLAAD is definitely, known as a nonprofit, I was like, we can also be our own little media outlet in some capacity, for these important conversations and important topics. So that was the first thing. And then, I think having had so much experience producing and booking talent at NBC and Access Hollywood, I think, they were really hoping to kind of take the work that they were doing, they meaning GLAAD, to the next level. And so I'm proud that, I was able to do that and still continue to do that. I think about, the early years of working, not the early years, but I mean, just a couple years ago, working with Beyonce and having her talk about Uncle Johnny for the first time, her uncle who had passed away. Yeah. So, I think the transformation for me is like, yes, we can book Oprah and Beyonce, big, high profile allies, to speak about supporting the community, but it's like, what are they actually going to say that's going to make a difference? And so I think that's super important. We don't just, work with celebrities just to have, fancy people really attending our events. It's like, how can we use this opportunity to really drive change? And, obviously more, this more than ever, we need allyship and we need support. But of course, at the core, it's about spotlighting and celebrating all parts of the community, people who are LGBTQ as well.
I love that. It's so important to be intentional with the storytelling and find those really special narratives that are going to connect with both older and younger audiences. So the Beyonce's uncle example is going to connect with an older generation, but also get these younger generations excited and inspired at the same time. How has your understanding, this is a good question, of representation shifted now that you're in the advocacy seat versus entertainment?
I'm just hyper aware of all different, there's so many different identities and there's so many different stories and there's so many different people that I want to hear from and I want to highlight. I think, I never, when I was at Access Hollywood, would ever think, do we have enough? Like, if I was putting together the show, for example, right? When we did the morning show, if we had like 4 white cis straight people all in a row, like I wouldn't even thought twice about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it just was, celebrities,
Yeah.
whatever. Now, because of the work that we do at GLAAD, I'm like, with our shows, with our events that we do, I am so intentional about I want everyone. I want trans people, I want Asian people, I want gay people, I want queer women. I want everyone to feel seen and represented in anything that we're doing. So I think that is, that was a big change. I don't think I ever was looking at the stuff that I was putting out into the world through that lens.
I think we should all use that lens.
Like even I remember doing, I had a weekly fashion thing that I did with Sean Robinson for a long time and with Liz Hernandez. And, I don't think I did this, but, I never was really paying attention to the people we were talking about in terms of an inclusive lens. You know what I mean? If we talked about 5 Hollywood women that were all white and had blonde hair, like I never really was paying attention to that. But now I'm like, oh my gosh, I would never. Are you kidding me? I want to make sure that we have every representation or as many as possible, that makes sense, in terms of what we're, talking about or what we're, trying to do.
So, such an important and great shift. And hopefully other people can learn and sort of be inspired and take that into their workplace. My other life outside of this creative field, I own and run an agency that represents a lot of big brands. And we really think about exactly how you're thinking, but it comes from the top, and I think it's because of my learning and understanding that we're also, when we're putting together influencer trips or campaigns, we're like making sure if there's 3 people, each one has to be unique and different.
Yeah.
So important.
And this was so different than where I came from in the network side. But it's like, if someone has a different way of doing something, it doesn't mean that it's the wrong way if it's different than the way that you do it. And I think that was like a big like breakthrough for me to realize, because I think we were told like, this is how you do this and this is what works. This is what success looks like. And, it was like very like, this is like mechanical, the mode of doing it, which, there is some truth to that. And there, but I think that, there's other ways of achieving
100%. And we're seeing that. We're seeing so much success with diversity. Coming off of what we just chatted about, this representation and talking about what's meaningful versus performative, but an industry moment where you're still like, oh, we're still so far behind.
With reality TV and the dating reality landscape, it's like when I turn that on and it isn't inclusive of people of color or LGBTQ people, I'm like, this is so unrealistic. Because... And not to say that it has to be like the gay version of The Bachelor.
I was just gonna say, why don't we have that?
Well, they tried it.
They tried it, didn't work.
It wasn't, but bless their hearts for trying.
Bless their hearts for trying. Or like Love Island and all these. I don't know if we have like
and I just think that like, with that specifically, like to like give, these are supposed to be like giving a glimpse into like real dating. It's so unrealistic to have all like, cookie cutter, the same, I do think that like, The Bachelor and The Bachelorette have definitely improved, but I don't remember seeing anyone that like, wasn't super fit and had abs and, gorgeous, everything. So I mean, that's the kind of thing where I still think I'm like, it's just that we're stuck in that.
We got Golden Bachelor age, but they're still beautiful.
Totally, yeah. Like on the alternatively, like when I turn on like the television and I see a big brand, and if it's a beauty brand or something like that, and I see all different diversity of bodies and ethnicities and hair colors, I'm so excited by that, because, for years we never saw anyone that was like not the traditional like sense of beauty or who was handsome. And so I love seeing that.
I agree.
So
I feel like we still are, we've seen it with women more, but I think with men, I think we still don't see enough inclusivity. When you look at like runways or sort of ad campaigns, you're still seeing like pretty much the same type of guy. Maybe he's a little bit like bigger build, but we're not seeing somebody with like less hair, somebody, different body type. Like, I think we're still lacking a little bit in,
Right.
in diversity with men. So I think for queer people, like this idea of safety in the traditional sense is so much beyond like physical safety. Like what are some of the spaces for queer people to find safety?
Coming out is there's no rules, there's no set timeline. People should come out when they feel safe. So that can be interpreted as many things. I think, for young people, sometimes they don't grow up in, affirming households. So, if you don't feel safe in that, but I think safety is about truly when you feel like the time is right to fully accept yourself and then surround yourself with chosen family, whether they're, blood family or your friends that really support, this person of who you are. And so that's how I think, when I think of safety for queer people, is really just being able to find that community that allows you to be who you are and doesn't question it.
I love that. It's so true, because that's what it is. I mean, I think for a lot of us, our friends become family. I mean, that's who we just have these bonds that are so deep. And who is the safety still not reaching? I mean, I think there's still a lot of people who still can't really find that space. Like, how do we bridge that gap? How do we outreach to and help and support them?
Unfortunately, trans people are really having the hardest time right now. And, I think if you look at the history of acceptance, I think most of America is like, gay people, sure, like I like Will and Grace or whatever. At lesbians, like, oh yeah, Ellen, that's literally what people think. But where the divide happens is really, surrounding acceptance for trans people. I remember not that many years ago, a couple years ago, did a study where we asked Americans, who is a trans person that or have seen. And the number one response was RuPaul. Obviously, that is not correct. RuPaul is a drag queen and is not a trans person. So that just goes to show you the amount of, misinformation and misunderstanding that's happening.
Yeah.
So, I always say, I think the dream for me would be, because going back to GLAAD's mission, the more that we see people in the community reflected in media, the better for potential acceptance. I want to see, like a Michaela J. Rodriguez in a big budget rom-com with Channing Tatum. Like,
oh my
something
God,
like
that would be amazing.
Would be incredible, just to kind of really, get people to understand what a trans person is. And
I agree.
I think Trace Lissette, obviously an amazing actress, Monica, and obviously in Hustlers has done it. But it's like, we need more of that.
Yeah. I would love to watch that rom-com.
Yeah.
What industries do you think are doing better than others, and which ones do you think need a full overhaul?
I think the surprising thing is video games are doing such a great job about, and I'm not a gamer, so I'm going to try and sound
fact,
like...
I have a gaming company that we built the first Metaverse Pride.
Okay, great.
Yeah, with L'Oreal and NYX Cosmetics.
See?
So I agree with you.
Yeah.
Gamers.
First off, with gaming specifically and queer people, I think it's such an outlet for them to feel connected because it's like, these alternative universes where they can be who they want to be. I mean, they can go into these gaming universes and be the people that they wish they could be in their everyday walking out of their house.
So it can be empowering.
Exactly. So there's such a relationship there. So I'm so excited that we even have inclusion and opportunities, and certain games you can opt to be a different gender or non-binary, etc. And so I think it's great that these video games that started as very bro muscle men saving the very feminine princess in the castle at the end have totally changed. And again, I am not a gamer, but I know that through the work that the GLAAD Media Awards is doing, we've just been able to recognize so many video games.
And in building that Metaverse Pride game that I did with all our research, we realized that actually so many gamers identify as LGBTQ.
So many, yeah.
And there's actually a big trans gaming community too. And in our Discord chat rooms, so what was beautiful about these Discord chat rooms is it's just your name. There's no identity. You could be anything, right? But we did ask our community members and some of them if they wanted to share, and a lot of people were like, oh, I'm trans or I'm gay. And I think that there was a sense of safety because you can't see or judge them and you're not in physical proximity. Right. So it's hard to sort of attack, and you could still be attacked in a chat room, but everybody was really supportive. And I think it was building these bridges, because we had straight bro gamers who are playing with trans gamers, but you don't know who each other are.
Right.
Like if I'm just like AH12 and you're AHB3, I don't know who you are. But when all of a sudden, if you have this best friend in a gaming world and you realize in the chat room that they're trans and you're a straight man, but yet here you are playing a game and having the best time. So why can't you get along in real life?
Right.
So I think there's something there. I totally
So much impact.
Totally agree. What is a message to young queer folks who are navigating corporate culture? I mean, especially now with where politics is going under, we don't have to get political, but in this new administration, DEI policies getting rolled back. So here we are, right? You and I who came up and we've changed and paved the ways and we've been able to be gay openly in our workplaces. But now some people might be scared, like what sort of a message to them, because we're regressing maybe in some places.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you mentioned corporate, and I want the part of that I want to address is I think that we are so intentional about working with companies that are supportive year round, not just in June.
Yes.
So I think that's so important. But for queer people that might be having like a hard time right now, I think it's so important to find people who are a good listener and who want to champion who you are. And it's so easy to get discouraged. And I also think it's important to limit, your consumption of media and news because they love to repeat the same thing and dissect it 900 ways. And, obviously it's all to get ratings and I get it, but it's like, I don't need to see the same horrible story on a rotation for 3 hours in the morning.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I agree with you. So that's a great piece of advice. Like, don't get caught up in that and just find your community. I think it comes back to finding your community because even in these like challenging times, we're here.
Yeah, it's so
those
hard
spaces
though.
exist. It is hard.
Like even for me as an adult, to work in LGBTQ advocacy and to be a queer person in 2025, it's like, I really got to take my time to meditate and take my time away because it can be very overwhelming.
100%. On my brand side too, as we see DEI policies like rolled back, like I don't believe it's the teams at these companies that we work with. The orders are coming from higher up. So, I can't blame like teams, but it's awkward conversations now because we can't use certain terms or, we can't say an event is linked to a certain cultural celebration. But yet we're still supporting the communities. It's just we can't like label it. So it's a confusing time, but hopefully it's temporary.
Mm-hmm.
So for this transformation moment, right, for yourself, is there a moment you look back and think that version of me couldn't have imagined this where you are now maybe?
So with clothing for me, and I remember this growing up was and still is like very important to me. And I think for queer people, especially, expression through what you wear is, it's your first opportunity to kind of share a look into who you are. I remember growing up, obviously closeted in school and really trying my hardest to like fit in and dress like one of like the straight like skater kids, you know?
Yeah.
But in reality, I did not want to wear that. I wanted to wear, and it wasn't like I was coming in a costume, but I wanted to wear, more, fashion and all of that was like really important to me. And I remember meeting this girl in high school, and she was so extravagant, so over the top. And she just would wear, like floor length fur coats, wigs, she looked incredible. And so I remember after I met her, I was like, why? It allowed me to embrace like this more like kind of like the real side of who I was. And so I definitely started dressing more of how I actually wanted to dress and not like who I thought I was like should look like to kind of like repress this identity of who I was.
Yeah, I think a lot of us, I think sometimes we get in our heads about like judgment. And I think 9 times out of 10, nobody cares. And even if they do, who gives a shit? I think it's so important to be yourself. And I 100% agree that fashion is such a huge form of self-expression. Also, makeup, which is why, I love what's changing now with beauty norms and there's no gender and like everything is gender fluid and even makeup brands are advertising for anyone. And it's funny because guy liner in Middle Eastern culture, men have worn eyeliner forever.
Right.
But so it's nice to see makeup being embraced for all genders too, because we can all, listen, everybody can use a little bit of foundation, you know? So let's just be real.
Something. Yeah.
Exactly.
No, but it is, I understand that too. I think that, the idea of, boys even wearing nail polish.
And I love seeing straight, cis men wearing nail polish.
It's like great. That was like, what? Like, what does that mean? And now it's like.
It became a rock and roll culture thing and punk and it's cool. So I love that that's changing. Is there a personal mantra or truth you come back to that keeps you centered? So like in this craziness, like something that just grounds you.
It's tough, but I think about all the time. I'm like, it's not that serious. Like I say that to myself all the time. Or when I'm like, oh my gosh, like what if I don't get this opportunity? Or what if, I am late to a meeting? Or what if, my dinner that I'm making for my partner is ruined? Like, I'm like, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like there are so many other things. Cause it's like, my partner, I often say, I'm like, just chill. It's not that big a deal. I just like, don't take myself that seriously. And I think that that's easier said than done, but I think I don't really care. Like if someone is, confused about my outfit that I'm wearing to the supermarket, if it's like doesn't match or what, I don't care.
As long as you're happy.
Yeah.
And no, I like that. Like
it's like,
I think we get caught up so much in, I think we're our worst critics. So we got to stop judging ourselves and just love ourselves, and everything else will fall into place. But I love that.
Yeah. And what's it saying? I did not come up with this. I am not claiming credit for it, but what you think of me is none of my business.
Yes.
And
what you think of me, is none of my business. Yes.
Yeah.
That's so good. And it's so true. It isn't.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, we end every episode with a really fun sip and spill quick fire round.
All right.
So a favorite Filipino comfort food that you want to learn to make next.
Okay. So I have started to learn to make it, but lumpia.
Ooh.
But here's the trick. I don't eat pork. I don't eat beef.
I don't eat
know
pork.
it's sacrilege. But there are ways of incorporating. I've heard of. I'm sure the Filipino community is very upset with me right now.
Yeah.
But you can do a Beyond Meat. You can do an alternative, or you can do vegetable. Or I even said, why can't it be a chicken? What if we did an adobo flavored lumpia? Why not?
That sounds delicious. And actually, I would love it with a short rib.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I also don't eat that, but yes.
Yes. But maybe we'll do dinner next time.
Yes.
What is like a Delulu thought? Because I'm full of Delulu thoughts. That's why I think that's why we're here where we are today. That keeps you going on tough days.
Wait, hold on. I'm like too old. What is Delulu?
Delusional.
Oh, what is
I know. Is that like too Gen Z for us?
No, I like it. I mean, listen. What is it? So what is the question? What is a delusional?
Yeah, delusional thought that like keeps you going, that's gotten you here. Like the delusions of grandeur that have got you to where you are.
I guess for me, and I don't know if this is fully answering the question, I still have like this weird imposter syndrome where I'm like, why would anyone care about like what I like did or like what I have to say or whatever? And so I guess for me, the believing in yourself and understanding and realize that, you're doing something impactful, but
and your thoughts maybe aren't that delusional, and people do want to hear from you, because I wanted to hear.
Delusions of grandeur. I know. I mean, but
I think the best people have. I mean, our delusions are, I think, sometimes our biggest dreams.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm a little delusional sometimes, but I'm like, when like someone that works for me now, she said, which is so lovely. She's like, it was my dream to work for you. I'm like, why?
That's beautiful.
But like I literally, she's like, told me all of these things that I had done that she had, was aware of. And I was like, I had no idea that like an impact would even, like happen in that way.
Take it in. Yeah, we got to take that in. That's beautiful.
And now I'm so lucky that she works on my team.
Yeah, I love that. What's her name? We'll give her a shout
Yolanda.
out. Yolanda, we love you.
The Queen Princess. That's her altar, her nighttime. She's a performer too. So
I love it. And then a dream PR campaign that hasn't happened yet, but should. Well, you gave us a dream movie with Michaela Rodriguez and Channing Tatum, but a dream PR campaign that you think would be incredible in the media.
I would love something that was like Crazy Rich Asians vibe, but maybe even more queer than that was. Because we had the moment, obviously, with Nico Santos' character. So if we could do something high profile, Asian American, that was inclusive of LGBTQ, and I don't know what that is. Maybe it's a fashion campaign. Maybe it's something, I don't know, but I would love to see what that is.
We need a Crazy Rich South Asians, and we need all the fabulous, because there's so many like fabulous gay.
Totally.
But I would love that.
Yeah, I'm like crazy, not so rich, half Asian. Yeah.
That would be a fun one too, though. That would be a good delusional show. And then finally, a drop of advice you'd whisper to your 22-year-old self right before you came out.
You will be so happy, and the work that you put out and whatever career it is will be so much better when it's coming from an authentic space.
So true.
I've met so many people, songwriters, artists, not even in the biz, that have said once they accepted themselves, which means they're not pretending to be someone else, they're not hiding, that everything that they put out
changed.
Was so much better.
Yeah. You don't realize sometimes the weight of something like that and can be holding you back from your biggest successes. So I think that's such good advice.
I don't think that there is any chance at all that I could have been on television talking about fashion if I was still in the closet hiding who I was, because I wouldn't have allowed myself to even explore that love, because I would be too concerned about, what is someone
thinking? Yeah.
And now I'm like, so that's, that goes away for the most part. And I really do feel strongly that once you just fully accept yourself, like whether it's art, work, whatever you are putting out there is just so much better because it's coming from authenticity.
So true. And such a good note to end on. Where can people follow you and GLAAD, and what's next?
Yeah, so it's GLAAD is GLAAD with 2 A's, not the trash bags, as I like to remind people. GLAAD on social media all over. And then me personally, it's Anthony Ramos AH, because I still have the Access Hollywood at the end, because
love it.
Changing your handle is quite the
it is.
It might be easier now, but I at one point I was like, I'm just leaving it.
It's stressful.
So people are like, Anthony Ramos, I'm like, yes, that's it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
I hope you all are inspired and learned a lot. Obviously, GLAAD is an incredible resource for anyone struggling. There's incredible resources for you. And also please DM us, reach out if we can ever be mentors or advise. And just remember, being safe isn't passive, it's powerful. Stepping into your identity and your SafeTea, as we call it, and really paying it forward to uplift others around you is a beautiful thing. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. For more conversations like this, subscribe and follow at the SafeTea on Instagram. See you next time.